Welcome to the Leadership School podcast. I'm your host, leadership and self-care coach, Kyla Cofer. Here at the Leadership School, you'll hear leaders from around the world sharing their stories and expertise on how to lead with balance and integrity. Our goal? Teach you how to be an extraordinary leader. Welcome back, friends, to Leadership School. I am so excited about today's episode because we're celebrating 50 episodes of Leadership School. This is a huge deal, and I am taking every chance I can to just really soak it in and celebrate it and just feel how awesome this milestone is for me personally. 50 episodes of a podcast that I started on a whim, and I have learned so much. It has been just a remarkable journey for me and for the podcast itself, and I really hope that it is helping you in your own leadership journey. So we're celebrating big by bringing back two former guests. We've got Dilip Ramachandran, who was a guest in season 1. It's been over a year since we've talked to him. So we're going to hear about his year, about things going on in his life, and what he's been doing since he was here at the podcast. And then we've got Lewis-Barr. Laura was a guest this year, season 2. She's a master storyteller. In her episode, she tells us all about what it means to tell a good story. And so we're going to also talk with her about some of those things. But really, this isn't really an interview. This is a little bit different. It's just a conversation between 3 professionals who really want to celebrate, talk about our life lessons, and just have a moment to enjoy, reflect, and be grateful. So I really enjoyed this conversation. It was different and unique, but chock full of lessons and camaraderie, some vulnerability, really beautiful. I know you're going to love it. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey of growing in our own leadership skills. It is truly my honor to show up in your podcast feed and to just be part of your lives in this way. I love what I'm doing, and I've learned and grown so much personally. Like I said, it's just been a remarkable journey. I am so proud to be here and celebrating 50 episodes. Thank you for celebrating with me. Enjoy this episode. As you know, the countdown always makes me nervous. So I like to get going and then talk, and then we just can continue on. So, but yeah, 50 episodes. I'm just thrilled. I really am. I was telling you guys just a second ago that I'm just really thrilled that we're here celebrating 50 episodes, because I never thought that I would get to 50 episodes of a podcast, because I never thought I would start a podcast. It was kind of something I just did on a whim. And yet here I am 50 episodes later, and I've interviewed so many people from all over the world, and including both of you. And it has been such a growing experience for me, and I've gotten great feedback. And I'm at a point where I'm like, well, if nobody ever listens to it, who cares? Because I'm learning a ton and I'm having a blast. So it's great.
Maybe we could interview you a little bit.
Oh, well, you're welcome to do that. Sure.
Because I want to ask you, and I was going to ask this just before you said it, what have you learned? How has this changed you?
There's Laura, the storyteller, and I think that's a really great introduction. So we'll pause and have a quick introduction, which I'm going to go back and I'll summarize everything later. But I am really grateful to have both of you on the podcast. We've got Laura Lewis-Barr and Dilip Ramachandran. So Dilip, you were in season 1 of the podcast, I think, last year. I should go. I didn't even go back and look before we recorded this, but I think you were in season 1, and our conversation was really impactful to me because I remember mostly how I felt afterwards in talking to you, because there's something about you that makes people feel really cared for. And so, and we've continued our friendship since that initial conversation. So I've been really, really grateful for that. And then Laura, we were just talking a minute ago about the power of storytelling, and your particular episode is holding the record for the most downloaded episode of the podcast. And I think that's because people really do understand the value of telling a good story. And you did such a good job that episode walking us through that. So congratulations on the highest downloaded episode. And I just thank you guys for celebrating. Here we're 50 episodes in, and I just wanted to celebrate that and mark it in some way. So I thought, what a unique way is having two guests return and like, let's just have a conversation, a little chit chat about like, life. But you asked a question, Laura, so I will let you repeat it, and then we'll use that as our starting point, I guess.
Yeah, I wanted to hear how the podcast has changed you, or what have you learned in the process?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked because it's kind of fun to share that on my own podcast. I've done it as a guest on other people's, but I think I've learned mostly to have belief in myself. Like that is hands down the most significant lesson that I've had in this, because when I first started it, it was a little scary. I was like, whatever, no one's going to listen to it. And now people listen to it. But I was like, no one's going to listen to it. It's just something I'm going to try and do. But I was at a point in my life where I was pivoting from being a super insecure person to being a confident person and being a person who loved and believed in myself. And so as I did this podcast, every single episode, I was like, I'm doing this. I actually know what I'm talking about. Because I did know what I was talking about. I just really didn't believe it. I don't know how to explain that any better, but I just didn't think that I mattered, or that what I had to say would be believable or whatever. And so, and then I would interview guests and they would say stuff and I would go, yeah, that's the same thing I teach people. And so I realized, like I do have these skills and I was right all along. And so just having that affirmation has really been, healing for me. And as I've grown, and it's given me confidence in being a more intentional, dynamic speaker as a keynote speaker. And then, gosh, as far as practical, I guess that's pretty practical. But as far as other lessons, like through the interviews, I mean, I can make a list of like different lessons from each and every one. So I've learned better interviewer skills. I think I've learned just better relational skills. I don't know. It goes on and on and on. I'm just really, really grateful. It's been such a good experience. So yeah, I don't know. That sounds good.
I love it.
Sometimes you have people take these like stop motion videos, right? And they take a picture of themselves, one every week or one every year, and they replay it. You could probably look at your 50 episodes and you could see how you've evolved as a coach. If you go and watch them back, just the way you ask the question, the way you hold yourself. I hope you get a chance to do that. That's probably cool.
That's a good idea. One thing that is interesting is that I remember when I was just starting out with solo episodes and I had no guests, and I was like, well, I wanted to do guests, but I didn't really know how to do that or how to find them. And I went to a networking event and I met someone and I said, well, why don't I interview you? And she agreed, Elaine Williams. And so she was my first guest. And then ever since then, I have had like nonstop requests to be on my show. I've had over 200 requests. I've never needed for guests. It has been just incredible. I like haven't even had to try that hard to find people. And I do make effort towards it because I'm not going to just have anybody who wants to say anything on my podcast. Like I'm pretty picky about who I choose to have on the show. But I just think that that's really, really cool that when you have something that is kind of a desire and sometimes you don't even really know it, and then you believe in yourself and you just try and go for it, how the world just kind of opens itself up to you. Have you guys experienced that in your careers? Tell me about those types of experiences that you've had.
I'll cede to Dilip
first. Sure, yeah. We talked about this. I don't remember on the podcast or we have had many chats, but this concept of, you touched a little bit on it, the idea of fake it till you make it, right? We say this thing that, hey, how does somebody get to be their optimal self, right? We only see them at the snapshot when they're doing their TED Talk, right? We don't see all the pre-chapters and the first works, we don't get to see all of that, right?
I love hearing someone's like, I made I was an instant success. And the first 6 months of my business, I did all of this. And, but really it was like, the previous 8 years that you didn't see, and you just saw the success in those 6 months.
Right. You don't realize the things that built you up to that point. And everybody who's been successful, they probably go through the thing that you went through, Kyla, right? Like they doubt, they wonder. I have too, right?
I was going to say, what about business, you? Tell us about you.
Yeah. Like looking at my business, I jumped into it, right? And I jumped in because I felt that there was nothing else. Like how you said, I felt that there was nothing else I could do. I had to do it. I felt so emboldened and confident about starting this company. And the purpose was so important. Once I actually started doing it, I realized, the idea of being your own boss and the idea of running your own business and having the freedom is very different from the real job of everything that comes with it, right? All the baggage that comes with running your own business and the risk and the financial freedom that you lose by running your own business, especially in the early days. And it's been tough. There have been many times where I've just asked myself the question, can I do this? Am I made for this? And I'm glad that, my wife, who's also my advisor, is always right next door. And she says, what are you talking about? Do you remember how you felt when you worked at a company, at a corporate job? Have you forgotten already? And I think the main thing, Kyla, for me is that it's going to be hard. Any kind of growth, any kind of stretching is hard. If it wasn't hard, everybody would be doing it. It's hard on purpose because it's a test, it's a trial of who you are as a person, right? Yeah.
I just saw a quote. I think Jesse Itzler said this on Instagram. I saw him write it on Instagram that if it gets really hard, that means you're weeding out your competition because they're going to quit when it's hard. And if you keep going, then you're the one who wins because you've kept going.
Yeah. Especially in this market, I think that's happening right now. And whatever you do, right? Any function or any skill that you're building, it's a test. It's a test of your resilience and your stamina. And absolutely. I talked to a founder at an event last week, and he's been running a company for something like 8 years, and we kind of resonated on that. Sometimes I'm just a cockroach. I told him that sometimes I'm just a cockroach. I just will not die. I just choose not to. I choose to. Of course, it's emotional some days. Of course, it's tough. I have a hard time getting through the day, but then I go to sleep, wake up, and I say, I'm going to keep doing this because the purpose and the mission is too important for me not to do it. The opportunity cost of it, I know it. I know I've done it, but I've done it before. And I just want to keep working on this. And then just time solves a lot of things.
Yeah. What about you, Laura? How have you had some of those experiences?
Well, I'm remembering Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, who I think he has quotes about, if you follow your path, the way will open for you. But in those really old stories, like the Knights of the Round Table, when they would go on their quest, if they found a path in the forest, it wasn't their path. They had to go to the darkest place where there was no path, because if there was a path, it was somebody else's. And so what Dilip is saying, I think, is so right on. It's hard. It's a hero's journey that we're on. And I was reading today, I think on Twitter, somebody tweeted about how if you're really afraid of a certain task, it's probably what you're meant for. And I was like, yeah, that's me. I mean, I'm really terrified of what I'm usually felt compelled to do. And that's hard.
Is there something that you've experienced that with recently? Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry, but I'm curious if there's something you've experienced that recently.
Yeah.
That you'd be willing to share. There's some hesitation there. You don't have to share. This is a safe space.
No. It's just so funny, the things that terrify, because it's not rational. I don't get why. So I don't like to produce live events. I used to produce theater. I'm about to produce screenings of films and discussions, and And I get very stressed because I think it's because I can't control it. I'm a stop motion filmmaker because I can control every little doll, every little movement. But when you produce an event, as you probably both know, you can go any which way. So yeah, I'm on that verge of feeling that fear right now and trying to breathe into it and keep moving forward. One thing I notice, and I don't know if you both agree with me on this, but to me, women seem to, like, I keep meeting women who are going back to school for their second master's, their second PhD. And I'm like, no. You just go and do what you do. When you were talking, Kyla, I was just thinking, it's so easy to just go back to school instead of go into the place and fight the battle, go into the lion's den, do it. But I'm always tempted to go back to school because then you have legitimacy and you're sort of safe. And so, yeah, I hope I haven't insulted people in school right now, but
no, and I think there's definitely reasons to go to school. Like there's some careers that you have to have a profession. I mean, I would hope my medical provider has gone to school, but so there's definitely reasons for that. But it is really interesting that you bring that up, just because I am seeing the decline in the celebrations of going to college, as in, like, it's not such a high, lofty, glorious, wonderful thing that everybody must do, because we're seeing value in the trades, and we're seeing, this is a total tangent, but we're seeing that, like, just go do the thing, and in doing the thing, in doing you learn, right? And doing that thing, you start to learn those skills. So, but Laura, I'm curious. You said, you hate producing live events, yet you're continuing to do them. So there's that fear there, but what makes you do it anyways? Like what calls you to go, yeah, but this is something that I'm called to do, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah. The question is, what is the nature of the call and how do we recognize it? Mm-hmm. Right. And Dilip was saying it sort of doesn't let me go. And if I don't do it, I'm miserable. If I do it, I'm miserable. but I know from my history that eventually I'm not miserable when I do it. Eventually I can enjoy doing it and feel that I've contributed a little to my growth and to the world's goodness. Because if we don't take our own hero's journey, then the world needs us each to take the journey, our own hero's journey. That's what we're all called to do.
Yeah.
So, like, what I'm hearing both of you say, and what I think too, is that the risk and the reward and the positive benefits, which is the reward, I guess, completely outweighs any risk or any fear, because it creates value in what we're doing.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, to touch on what Laura was saying, partially the kind of things that we're all working on are also creative explorations, right? And there's a book, there's a book called The War of Art. If you read that book, I have it here on my shelf. And there's one chapter just talks about the creator's dilemma, and it's just making a movie or making a podcast or writing a book, like what I went through last year. It might be easier to do something that's less risky and just not do it. It compels you to go that way, but you can't. It's like an inside battle. Inside a creator has that battle, right? Because the creativity needs to come out. It needs to come out. It can't stay in there. Whether it's building a business or making a movie, hosting a podcast.
It's so fun because I used to think that I was not a creative person at all because I can't paint or draw, and I associated that type of art with all creativity. So, like, it didn't occur to me that I was creative. I was a creative writer, creative in conversation, like creative in ideas, all of that. Like, I just thought, oh, I'm not a creative person. And in fact, I still regret it. And I've apologized and made amends. But one time I even said that about my son. I said, well, he's not very creative. But what I meant was he can't draw and it's not his thing. Like, anytime you put a crayon in front of him, he will pretty much just break it in half and throw it on the floor. Like he does not want to color, but the kid is super creative with other things, making up stories, and just his imagination is incredible. So he's very creative, and I don't know why in my head I always understood that creativity meant can you draw well and can you paint and color well. So it's been a real gift to go, wait, I can write a book, I can make a film, I can talk on a podcast. Like that's art, that's creation, that's
right.
fun.
I'm gonna go on a tangent here, so you can edit this part out if you want to.
No.
But, really, I think when I grew up in Sri Lanka, the culture that I grew up in, my expectations from my family was, hey, you're going to be an engineer, or you're going to be a mathematician, or you're going to work on those arts, right? You're not going to be an artist. You're not going to be doing anything like that. So the word creative was sort of like a bad word in my family, actually. Really. Like, it wasn't a word that was ever used. He's smart, or she's smart, or she's good at math, or he's good at math, but never, this person is creative. So I actually think through my journey of running the business in the past year or 2 years now, I recently have gotten comfortable saying, when people ask me, tell me about yourself, I actually have gotten comfortable saying that I'm a creative person. It's taken me decades to say that out loud, and it feels so good to say because I am a creative person. I wrote a book. I love to compose things, compose dance, so compose things in a company. Those all requires creativity, and that's a gift, right? It's not a black mark, So, and with being creative comes all these challenges, internal war, the war of art, right? The internal war that we all have, that we need to find our own path to, right? Not somebody else's path, our own path. And the reality is, when you read these books and you watch these movies, they only show some of the parts, right? They cut out the parts that didn't work very well. So there's like some sort of confirmation bias there about what parts work well. But there's a lot of trial and error that goes into all of this work that we don't really talk about.
Right. So what you just said is really interesting to me because when I started this episode, I was telling you about how I struggled with confidence and insecurity and disbelief in myself. And I realize now that those were a lot of lies that I told myself, and other reasons for one reason or another. But I'm hearing too that you had some of those things too, like where you had told yourself that you weren't a creative person. And so we've all had to learn like these new things about ourselves that were always true, but we didn't believe them. But what's funny is we kind of tend to think that we're the only person who experiences that. I'm wondering if you felt that way too, either of you, because I always thought like I was the only person, everybody else was good with themselves, and I just had to figure that out. Did you guys experience that?
Kyla, I see what you send out via emails and messages to the world, and you're so vulnerable in them. I'm always like, whoa. And you're willing to say what I think we're all thinking, but I don't know, how it is, Dilip, in your culture, but in the US, there's so much, pressure to have it all together all the time. And, I think I'm getting better at admitting to myself what's not together, but am I really willing to announce it? Bravo to you, because I think it does feed us. It does heal us when we let each other know that I'm scared.
Well, it takes practice, so I learned a lot from my husband, who has a lot of practice in this because of his own personal journey, which I don't need to share because he's not here. So, but his own personal journey is a lot of practice in sharing his story. And I was just always impressed. So I'd be like, why would you tell me that? Like, you're going to tell me that? That's pretty a vulnerable thing that you did or that you experienced. And I can't believe you'd be willing to share. And I don't know everything, we keep things to ourselves, right? You guys I might be pretty vulnerable in my posts or my emails and my podcast, but, you guys aren't ever going to hear it all. Like, there's always going to be something that we'll keep to ourselves. But it certainly is something that takes practice because, I don't think I ever would have been willing to admit that I had a history of depression until I started admitting that I had depression. And once I started doing that, I saw the benefits and how it healed me. Because the more I spoke about it, the less I felt like it had control over me. Now I had control over it, and it changes your perspective of things, but it takes a vulnerability and is not something to take lightly. It definitely takes practice. And I think there have to be a lot of boundaries with it, for sure, because there is such a thing as TMI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And, sometimes I think folks, and to your point, Laura, where you said about the culture, I think it's a global thing. It's not just an American thing. It's a global thing that everybody wants to be picture perfect and pixel perfect. And it's almost self-driven by leaders, as though I think leaders feel that they have to do that because the employees expect that of them. And sometimes employees do expect that of their leaders because that's what someone told them they should expect of their leaders. And it's difficult for people to break the mold. And I feel lucky as the owner of a company, as a founder of a company, that I can make bold decisions. We've done so many bold decisions in the past 2 years that broke open those shells. It has to come from the top, right? The changes have to come.
Does.
So in the way we work, in our work week, in our organizational culture, in the way we deal with transparency, companies still do need strong leaders. They want leaders to be consistent and strong. I think it's required of you to stay on track to something consistent and long-term. But it doesn't behoove us from saying what's really going on, right? The challenges of what's really going on, so that you can work together as a group to solve the problem, then kind of hold it in one person's head. But yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Finish.
No, please go ahead.
My brother was a CEO of a company, and he told me, and it was a pretty small, it wasn't a huge company, but he used to have a monthly meeting where he spoke about his biggest mistake of the month as a way to really invite everyone to share the failures, because that's the only way we learn, is when we share them and think about them and let them be that failing fast, failing forward.
And celebrating them in a way.
That he did that.
Like he was kind of celebrating it. Like, this is great. We failed. So
this is my biggest failure. What's yours? Yeah. So kind of normalizing that. Yeah. I was very impressed when he told me that.
Yeah. And Kyla, what you're doing though in your LinkedIn posts and in your emails, I agree with Laura that it takes a lot of strength to do that. And it shows that you're committed to this path of coaching people, because you can't coach people if you can't be true about yourself.
Yeah, I think there are times in our life when it's important to do our own work and to do what we need to do to care for ourselves and heal. And then there are times in our life when our story can help other people, and just, I was telling Laura right before you came on, Dilip, that there was a workshop that I just did where I was sharing some of my own personal stories in that workshop. And it was kind of hard to share some of those stories because they were new stories that I hadn't told before. But in the doing so, it was like this opportunity of how my story, and using that to propel the whole message I was offering of, I'm not just telling you something. I'm not telling you to change or to do something different with your life because, I read a book and thought it would be a good thing to do. I'm doing it because my own experiences taught me that. And because we learn through stories. And like we were saying, I think that's why your episode has been the most downloaded episode, Laura, is because we intuitively understand that we learn through stories, and that leadership is bringing people into this compelling story that we're telling. So through doing that and just practicing that, I have just seen how people are way more willing to tell me what's going on with their life when I share something that I can relate. Because they'll go, oh yeah, I was depressed once too. And this is how I went through that. And I can go, yeah, or I'm really not feeling it right now. And I can say, I've been there. Think about like when you're talking to anybody, like kids. I know, Dilip, you've got kids, and Laura, actually, I don't know if you've had kids. So you have I was going to say you have an animal
counts.
child.
That counts.
So,
and he's like a bad 3-year-old.
I remember that.
So.
There you go. It counts.
Whenever you're teaching, I tend to think younger because I'm around my younger kids all day long. So that's the first example that I have. But when you're sharing with somebody else, they're not going to learn by you just telling them what to do. They learn from, hey, one time I went through this experience, this is how I handled it, and this is what happened to me. And then they go, oh, like you're actually legitimate. Like you actually aren't just telling me because you're trying to be all smart, but you're telling me because you've been through it before. And you go, well, yes.
That resonates. I didn't think about that, Kyla, but that really resonates because when I'm talking to my daughter, and our job as parents is to guide them, right? Is to help them through the life that they're going to live. And we are telling them things, to your point, not because we want to talk at them. We want them to have a good life. And I found it's actually interesting that when I open up and share something from my life, she typically goes, really? That really happened to you? Tell me more about that story. Tell me more what happened. And I think it sticks with her, whatever I've said. And it's probably the same thing with your sessions, because they came to the session. Why did they come? We don't really know why they came. Maybe they felt like your marketing was good, right? Or they felt like your price was right. Who knows, right? But they came. They showed up. Yeah. Right? They're there now. And they're probably thinking like, why should I listen to her? And I think when you tell that story, they feel a sense of connection and a sense of trust that opens the door to what you're really saying, right? So I think opening up is like the entry point to what you're really trying to say, what you're really trying to help someone through so that they don't go through the challenges that you've gone through.
Laura, you could probably affirm that. Like, is that what Dilip just mentioned a couple of things, trust, and you said another word that I've just blanked out on, but what is it, the connection? What is it that draws people in, that people will remember and learn a lesson through a story better than just me telling you a lesson? Like, what is it about the story that changes that?
Yeah, I think, human beings have been telling stories for millennia, right? And our brains are wired in a certain way that when you tell a really good story, you tell a story that allows me in, our brains start to sync up.
Interesting. Yeah.
So it's one of the reasons why stories are memorable. And yeah, or like the whole mirror neuron thing. So if you're telling me a story and I'm visualizing the story, I start to kind of live it too. If I watch a story in a film, I can start feeling the same thing. It's like we're wired in terms of mirror neurons and everything else to sync up with each other. And that's how empathy is born, right?
Because it's not just our mind, it's not just thoughts. It brings all of the parts together. You got the mind, the thoughts, the soul, emotions, all of those parts are kind of like working in sync together. That's really interesting because I coach mostly on burnout. I coach on several other things, but burnout's kind of my main topic. And the definition of burnout is the mental, emotional, physical exhaustion from overwork or stress.
Yeah.
But in storytelling, it sounds like you get mental, emotional, and physical like connection with somebody through a story. So I just see how healing sharing stories can be, which is, I guess, why it's important for me to be vulnerable and to tell those things, like tell our failures. Like Dilip, you had the last 2 years have been hard doing your business. You're starting a new business and you have 2 countries that you're working with, maybe more. And that's really challenging. And Laura, like going out and producing these live events to showcase things, like that's really scary. And the more you share that with people, they can go, oh, I totally relate to that, but look at her doing it anyway. And in sharing that, we're like, see, we've done this because we believe in it and we believe in you too. And people get this like boost of belief is powerful. Belief is so powerful. Maybe that's kind of what we've been talking about and skirting around this whole conversation is just how the belief in your own story, the belief in the story that you're telling, and how that carries you. Maybe I want to hear what you guys, your experiences with belief and belief in yourself or belief when someone else has believed in you. Maybe you have a story of someone who really believed in you that pushed you, or a time when you were like, a little bit nervous, but you really believed in yourself, so you did it anyways? Let's hear some stories since we're talking about stories.
Yeah, those are really great prompts. I usually give a prompt that's, tell me a lesson you learned the hard way. Because I guess in terms of storytelling, it's the obstacle that is the most interesting, right? So a time, yeah, like a time I didn't believe in myself, but then I realized I was wrong. That's an easier story for me to tell because I think just finding the win, well, it goes against my way of teaching storytelling, which is to embrace the obstacle. Like the obstacle is central to the story.
Uh-huh.
So the first time I was involved in a filmmaking project, I was made the director, but I didn't know anything about filmmaking. And everybody knew I didn't know anything about filmmaking. And it was excruciating.
Oh how old? Do you remember how old you were, or like what age?
No, I mean, I was an adult.
Okay.
This was maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago or something.
Okay, so you weren't like 18 or something. This was well into adulthood.
No.
Okay.
I had been doing theater for a long time and I got this opportunity for a film on one of my scripts and they said, would you direct? I'm like, okay. And,
hold on. What gave you the courage to say yes in the first place? Because you could have just said, no, I'm not going to direct. I don't know anything about directing, but you said yes. What?
Yeah, I said yes because, you know, the ability to make a film is so amazing. And that whole story. All right. I have to go back a little bit.
Please.
So it was New Year's Day, January 1st. And I had an intuition and I don't usually get those. And the intuition was go to Craigslist and type in the word theater.
Okay.
And I know. And I did. And the first thing that popped up, and I was the first person to answer the ad. They were looking for a script to make a film. These filmmakers, new filmmakers. And, you know, the ability to make a feature film is what everybody hopes for. So I was going to say yes, because the whole thing felt like a miracle. Like I had this intuition, but in the midst of it, it was excruciating. And I didn't know what I was doing. Everybody knew I didn't. And the actors wouldn't listen to me. And, but little miracles, like you said earlier, things kept coming my way. I found an editor that helped me. Other people dropped out, so I had to learn how to edit. And it was a crash course. And now I'm a filmmaker, and I'm a filmmaker because of that event. But
you could have at any point just given up and walked away.
Yeah.
But you couldn't, because how would you have felt had you walked away? You wouldn't have been okay with that.
Right. Well, it was waiting for me.
Yeah.
I've walked away from things in the past and they've left too. But this wasn't leaving.
That's amazing. Yeah. And so I can imagine, how long was that process? Are we talking like 3 months, 2 years?
Well, the filming we did in 7 days because it was a zero budget thing, a feature film, zero budget. And then the producers decided they didn't want to finish the project, and they kind of led me on for maybe 2 years. They just kept saying, I'm working on it. And then they finally saw I wasn't letting go, and they had to admit that they had let go. And they said, do you want to finish it? So then it was another year. So the whole thing maybe took 5. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting because I think we tend to think that stories like that, when we hear them, this was like 6 months and excruciating. And after 6 months, here she was, and she knew how to direct, and she knew how to create films, but it was a long process. And that must have, and during that process, it wasn't like one day you were stressed out about it. I imagine there were a lot of stressful, challenging days. I mean,
up and down,
the word excruciating is a pretty powerful word.
Yeah, well, I feel things pretty strongly. Yeah. And then years later, I got into a film festival and that was like amazing. But there were problems with the film. So I got to see on the big screen every flaw in the film. So, life is that way. I'm guessing Dilip can talk about this. It's like there's the rush and the joy and then the crash of the next set of learning.
Right? It's like we climb a mountain, we get to the top and we're not like, our life is complete. Then we're like, look, I see another mountain.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
the creative life.
That's the creative life. And I can really resonate with that. And if you just look at, it's like this Riverside logo, right? It looks like that, right? It's a sine wave, right? That's what it looks like. But it looks like that if you're focusing just on that 1 week or that 1 month, once you zoom out, what I've seen is that it looks like that. And when you zoom in, it's like that, right? But you're progressing through your career.
For our listeners who don't know, you're mentioning the Riverside logo because we're using Riverside as our recording platform, and it's just a little wave. So
it's like a sign. I just see it right now. It just came to me when you talked about it, Laura. It's a sine wave, right? So totally. Yeah. And I think, and we talked about this, I think, kind of just on a chat that we had sometime. Your sensitivities change over time. So I remember when the first time an employee at my company resigned. And for us, when we have an employee, the employee works for us, but also maybe works for a client. And so there's like a double level of stress there because you've got to tell the client, somebody who I committed to you, he actually is not going to make it. And it could affect downstream for them because they're trying to build something, but they're trying to do something with the resource we committed to them. And so I remember kind of sweating. And I was in Sri Lanka, so it was hot too. But I would say I was extra sweating, okay? Hands sweaty. And I was talking to my brother. I can remember the moment right now. And I just thought I was dying. I really thought there's something physiologically in my body that's telling me, stop this thing. You're not made for this. And of course, my dad and my brother, they've been in business for decades. So they kind of called me off the ledge and they said, listen, this is how it's going to be. What's going to be your risk mitigation? How are you going to make sure it doesn't happen next time? And, just looking at the problem, addressing the problem objectively, and then coming out with the plan. We implemented something as a result of that, right? We changed our contracts. We changed something in the way the business works as a result of that learning. Each time, people come and go to companies. It just happens. Like people have lives, and their lives, they have to follow the path of their own stream. Right? Their stream is meandering, and sometimes it comes with our stream, sometimes it leaves our stream, and you just can't grab onto them like that. We think our stream's awesome. We think this is a great stream. It's got fresh water, it's got great salmon, but we can try to make the stream better over time. But sometimes the stream's going to part ways. And now, when somebody says they're resigning, what I say is, it looks like you're going to a better job. I'm so happy for you. I'm happy that we have trained you and upskilled you to a place that you can go to that job that you couldn't go to before us. We wish we could do better to keep you here. We'll work on that. Tell us what we can do to do better. That's just one example of how I've grown from something that used to terrify me.
That's amazing because, you literally had the fight or flight response. You had the flight response, right? You're having a panic attack. Your whole body is under this shutting down stress moment. And the very first time this happened, but it wasn't the last time it happened. And so now because you've had those experiences, you've built on it and you've developed some resiliency and now understand how to almost celebrate those moments. It's that's such a shift from celebrating somebody to being literally sweating, terrified, panic attack.
Yes.
What a cool shift. And like you said a second ago, when we're looking right at this first moment, we only see what's happening in front of us. But if you can zoom out and you see the bigger picture, of our whole lives, and all these different things and the way we've learned and grown, that we have really done much better than we thought.
Yeah.
And I'm really impressed because I think if we don't go and deal with the emotional impact of what's happened, then we don't get to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to feel the emotion, because Brene Brown talks a lot about this. If we're sort of shutting that off, we don't want to feel the shame, the fear, the terror, then we don't get to use it and learn from it and grow.
And those things never go away either. Like, we'll just have that experience again and not know how to deal with it the next time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Then, I think, it's like making the same mistake twice. We don't want to do that, right? We want to make new mistakes. I always tell my daughter that. And I think it's isn't that from a song?
I don't know.
I think it's from a Shakira song. Make new mistakes, right? I want to say something that Laura talked about. You became a director. You asked to become a director of this movie, and they knew that you couldn't do it. But I think the beautiful thing about what we can do in organizations is maybe they said this to themselves, or they told this to you, like, she'll figure it out, or he'll figure it out. I think when you're in an organization, you can say that to someone else in your organization, and I try to say that as much as I can, because the more I say it, that means the more I trust my team. That's like the most powerful, couple of words you can say to someone. Like, yeah, you'll figure it out.
Sometimes it's scary as the leader to say that, especially if you already know how to do something, because you are wanting to kind of micromanage. But if you can trust somebody to figure things out, it is very empowering for both of you. But to be that person can be a little bit scary unless you don't know how to do it. Then you're like, oh, figure it out. I'm farming that off to somebody else.
Right. But even if you know how to do it, though, Kyla, you're bringing somebody else in because it's not the right thing for you to do. As a leader,
right,
you have to decide, are you going to do sales? Are you going to do fundraising? Are you going to run the business? Are you going to write the marketing copy? You can't do all of it. Someone has to figure it out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to scale.
That's where that burnout conversation comes in. And we're like, but I can do it all. What do you mean I can't do everything? I can. At the end of my talk that I just did, I was telling this quote, and I just think it's so beautiful. And it's a great time to bring it up. There's a beautiful prayer written by the Bishop Ken Untenor. And it's actually usually most always attributed to the Saint Oscar Romero. And it's a beautiful prayer. So go Google it. The whole prayer is out there. And I may have had an early on episode of the podcast where I talked about it because it's been so much powerful. But there's one line in it where he says, we cannot do everything. And there's a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and to do it very well.
Yeah.
And that's just always been really healing to me, because I kind of did think growing up and, in college that it was my responsibility to kind of manage everything in my life and a little bit further outside of my life to manage everything and everyone. And, I think leaders tend to do that because we see all the stuff that needs to be done. And so we just kind of start fiddling and doing it all. And so I just always thought that I had to be in control and in charge of everything, but we just can't do that. We're not built for that. And so when we can hone in on what are these things that really give me joy? And I could still dabble in other things. It doesn't mean I have to be I only make movies. Well, only making movies also has meant that you've done editing, you've done the producing events, you've done all these things. I only do my job. Well, you're also a parent. You're the CEO. You're a confidant. You all those things. I don't just do the podcast. I do keynote speaking and coaching. You get to do little different things involved, but you can do one thing really, really well and take great pride and joy, I think, in those things without feeling but I also have to write 17 books, and I also have to go on a tour, and I also have to be on all the PTAs and volunteer in 3 different local nonprofit organizations. Come on. There's some people, maybe that's their gift, but if it's not your gift, then let's not try and do everything.
Yeah.
I just keep hearing emotional intelligence in everything you guys are talking about, that, being in touch with our emotions is the beginning and the end of living successfully, I think. And its relationship to burnout, its relationship to learning. Those are the 2 things I've taught in my life. And I just keep, and I don't do as much emotional intelligence training, but I'm just really hearing the bedrock of our conversation to me is resting on being willing to be in our emotions and learn from them. And Yeah.
Yeah.
Just have to speak up for those emotions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like my number one goal is to really be an emotionally intelligent person and pass that on to people I'm around. It's such a good goal. I think that's a really good point to kind of start tapering off. I think the three of us feel like we could probably just keep going for a while.
Oh yeah, for sure.
As I always do in these conversations, which is why I don't know how people do like 20-minute episodes with guests. That's genius. I can't do that. But so I kind of want to end on some really, really positive notes. I would love to hear, since you were on the podcast, what is maybe one big win that you've had? And what is just, let's have like a really gratitude. I love, and I'm starting to learn to end days and begin days with a lot of gratitude. So what's just things that have come up that you've just been really grateful for? Maybe since the podcast last year, and I don't know, today, whatever that is, like what is a big win that you want to celebrate? We can all celebrate that with you. And then your gratitude, what comes up for you of what you've been grateful for?
Yeah, I've gotten into a film cooperative, which means that I meet weekly with other filmmakers, instead of just being in my basement by myself making films. And they're telling me about my work in such a positive way. I've just been getting such positive feedback from these filmmakers or these voice actors, these film festivals. And that's just a dream come true because, I thought that I had the talent, but, so I'm both grateful that's the win of this year for me, is to say I'm a filmmaker. Yeah.
That's huge. That's so awesome.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
It is huge.
That's great. And we're going to make sure to put some links in the show notes to, if you want some of your films or a website. 'Cause I don't think I've asked you for those. So make sure to send me that stuff. If it's changed since your original episode, because people need to see your films and you're making them to share them. So let's let people see them, and we want to celebrate that with you. That's awesome.
Thank you.
What about you, my friend Dilip?
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, from my side, I started the journey of thinking about writing a book to actually writing a book and publishing it this year, and hearing the reception from people. I'm a published author now, which is awesome. I can say that. My daughter can walk around with the book that I wrote. It's kind of a cool thing. But beyond that, this company that I've built was a very difficult year in Sri Lanka. And it was a tough time for people living there. We supported 35 people and their families through this difficult time. That's a massive win. And the sky's the limit. The last week that we were at a conference, we were talking about the products we're building, and people are excited about what we're doing. People really want us to build it soon. So it's more empowering than I expected. So I'm very grateful for what this year has been. And I want you to sort of said, since the podcast, I don't know if you remember, but the day we had the podcast was a tough day for me. I was in Colombo, Sri Lanka at that time, and I was interviewing like our first leaders. It was very, very hard to get people to join a company that didn't have a name. But when we had the chat, when I said things to you, you kind of believed in me. You believed in what I was doing. You lifted me up on a day that I needed to be lifted up. And, I can remember that day. I can remember the room I was in. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea. I'm so honored that you would say that and share it.
True.
Thank you, Dilip.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I don't remember that at all. So I remember our conversation, but I didn't know that you were having that experience. So I think that just shows how powerful the moments of us showing up and caring about people we're in front of. I don't interview people because just to get your content out of you. I want to know who you are, and I really do care. And so I think that is a really beautiful thing, to show up and care for people, and then just to see how that can impact somebody's life. And I'm just so excited for that.
Yeah, you were my first ever
ever what? I didn't hear at the end.
First ever podcast ever.
Shut up.
That I talked about myself first time ever.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, you fake it till you make it. You said that, I guess, but never told me, and I never would have known any different. How many podcasts have you been on since then?
Oh, many. Yeah. It's been great. Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. You guys, thank you so much. I guess for myself, I think I kind of already shared some wins. I've been doing a lot more speaking, and I love speaking. Somebody asked me yesterday, they said, well, like, how do you feel speaking in public? Is that something that you had to learn? And I was like, oh no, I just love doing it. I've always loved speaking. And it confuses me when people say they don't like speaking in public, because I'm like, well, why wouldn't you? And I've just always loved it. But I just kind of did it here and there. And I mean, I've done it all over the world, but really on a casual basis. And so now just getting into the more professional speaking, that has been a huge win, because I've invested a lot professionally into that. And to see that coming about, gives me a lot of gratitude and pride. I think sometimes that it's really, we feel a little scared to say we have pride in ourselves and our accomplishments because it makes us feel arrogant. But I don't think that that's true. I think there's a line. We don't want to be like, I am so awesome, look at me, but I think that it's important to look back and be proud of who we are and what we've accomplished, and to not be afraid of that. So I've learned that. I mean, but I'm proud of that hard work that I've done, and just really grateful. And I'm super grateful for my family support. So when I'm traveling, I've got family who watches my kids. I've got a spouse who supports me and helps me research events. And right now we're interviewing, and I didn't tell him this was on the calendar. And so I'd been out of town, and he was really excited. We were fine. He's been running around all week. We were going to finally have this day at home. And I called him in 2 hours before our interview and went, oh yeah, I have an interview today. Can you keep the kids quiet? And he was like, are you serious? I got to leave. I got to get the kids out of the house so they don't interrupt. And it just changed all of his plans. And he just does it with joy. He's like, I'm going to support you in what you do. May we all have somebody on our team who supports us like that. What a gift to have that. And I know that you guys do. Well, let's end there. Who is somebody that has really believed in you and supported you, and because of them, you are where you are?
My husband, Rick. Yep.
Yeah. How has he supported you? What has he done?
Oh my gosh. When I was producing live theater, we'd go find pieces of bathroom fixtures to build a set, and he'd put it in his car. And he works the box office. He does everything. He's so very, very, very supportive and sweet. He'll do voices for my films. He'll do whatever.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's really cool. Oh, so fun. And it changes things, right? Because you wouldn't have been this far if you would have had a husband or a spouse who was like, oh, you're doing that again. It doesn't make you excited to pursue your goals, or a best friend. I mean, if you're not married, you've got friends and you've got family members. I mean, how much easier is it to do something when you've got somebody cheering you on? And I guess if you don't have someone cheering you on, then you're not around the right people, because there are people who do this. What about you, Dilip? I know you've got somebody who's really
no, of course. When you guys talked about who believed in them, the first thing that popped in my head was my mom, of course, my late mother. Everybody's mom believes in their children, right, completely. So she was number one fan. Of course, she's not there with us today, but she was amazing. My wife has been such a huge supporter. She's helped me build a business. She challenges me when I complain.
I love you said that earlier. When you're like, oh, I can't do this. And she's like, yes, you can. Keep going.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. She moved with me to Sri Lanka for 5 months. She has been through a lot. She's been a great supporter. And really, it'll be unfair to say it's one person. It's my family, my brothers, my daughter, They've all seen that I'm doing something. They all recognize that what I'm doing, while difficult and while, what's the use, I forget the word you used, but synonym for difficult that you used, Laura. Despite that, they know that it's the path that I need to be on, and they're really helping me be on that path.
Yeah. And we do that for other people. So gosh, how important is it to have those people around us? I mean, and with that, just once again, I am so grateful for both of you. I would not be at 50 episodes of a really cool podcast without any of my guests. And you two definitely have been really significant in just my personal life and the stories and the talks that we've had, how they have shifted the way I've approached my leadership and the podcast itself. You guys are amazing. And thanks for being willing to just come on here again a second time and just celebrate with me. 50 episodes. Here we go. So maybe we'll be doing this again at 100. That would be really cool.
Let's do it. I'll be there.
Bravo to you.
Thank you guys so much.
Congratulations.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. If you've liked what you heard and you want some more tools and resources to help you on your journey, go check out kylacofer.com/free stuff.